Have you ever wondered how many times love passed you by, just hoping you had the courage to hold on to it before it was too late? Hi, I'm Yuna, and I welcome you to Happiness of Love. Get ready for an exciting story that will leave you amazed. Enjoy the video, and may God bless you and your entire family. Have an amazing day. William firmly gripped the polished iron bar in the private gym of the luxurious building where he had been staying since returning to Chicago. Sweat dripped down his forehead, but it wasn't the physical exertion that made him restless. As he completed another series, his thoughts were far from there. The same question had been echoing in his mind since he landed at the airport. Why did he feel like something was missing? He, at 28, was the new CEO of the food company his family had built with decades of hard work. His return was celebrated by shareholders and the local press, but, amidst the praise and expectations, he felt only a strange nostalgia for a time that seemed lost. The morning was sunny, and the view from the top of the building revealed a vibrant and busy Chicago, but William seemed oblivious to the panorama. After training, he threw the towel over his shoulders and picked up his cell phone. His schedule was packed: strategic meetings, a lunch with investors and a charity event in the evening. He should have been excited about the new challenge, but instead, a subtle memory disturbed him: laughter in a park, the scent of coffee on a cold afternoon, and the indescribable feeling of being next to someone who made everything seem simpler. Kate. He felt ridiculous for thinking about her after so long. Chicago seemed smaller since he came back, and he didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. While William faced the day in a busy corner of Lincoln Park, Kate adjusted the dental equipment in her office with precision and agility. At 26 years old, she was a professional admired for her empathy and dedication. His last patient, an 8-year-old girl afraid of dentists, had left laughing, carrying a heart-shaped balloon. Kate was proud of these small moments of impact, but when she turned off the equipment and leaned back in her chair, the silence in the room was almost deafening. She looked at the clock on the wall and realized she had a half-hour gap before her next appointment. Kate walked to the window, where the bustle of the streets seemed almost therapeutic. She remembered how much she loved this city: the smell of the leaves in autumn, the afternoons by the lake, the cafes hidden in less crowded alleys. But there was something about the routine of his life that seemed unchanging. The comfort she had built, the stability, all of that was good, but something was missing. An inexplicable void. His thoughts, as always, ended up returning to one specific memory: William. He had been gone for almost a decade, but there were moments when his face invaded your mind with a clarity that almost hurt. She shook her head, frustrated with herself. "You're over this, Kate," she told herself. The day progressed differently for both of them. William was stuck with charts and market projections, surrounded by executives eager to impress him, while Kate immersed herself in caring for her patients, listening to life stories that contrasted with her own apparent calm. Both so different, on seemingly distant paths, but carrying the same inexplicable longing. When night arrived, William observed the illuminated city from the window of his new room, which occupied the top floor of the family's corporate building. The view was spectacular, but he couldn't connect with it. Everything seemed like a cold landscape. On the other side of the city, Kate was finishing closing the office. He grabbed his coat and went out to walk to a nearby cafe. As the cold wind blew, she felt a shiver run down her spine, as if something was about to change. Both continued their nights, unaware that destiny was already beginning to conspire to bring them closer together. Daily life took its course, but soon, their predictable routines would be broken by something much bigger than they could imagine. Nathan was elated. William's return to the city was the perfect excuse to organize one of his famous parties, and he was keen to ensure everything was impeccable. The sprawling Lakeview home was decorated with soft lights and elegant floral arrangements, while a carefully curated playlist filled the room with a lively yet relaxed tempo. Nathan wanted William to feel welcome, but he also had another goal in mind: reuniting old friends, especially a certain someone he knew William had never forgotten. Even if he never admitted it, when William arrived, still wearing his impeccable suit from the day of meetings, he felt the impact of the environment. Nathan's infectious laugh was the first thing he heard, followed by a warm hug that almost suffocated him. Finally, the man of the moment. "You needed an epic event to mark your return, my friend," Nathan said, pushing a glass of champagne into William's hand. William smiled, but it was a restrained, almost rehearsed smile. He didn't feel completely at ease, surrounded by familiar and strange faces who studied him curiously, as if trying to decipher who he had become. He walked around the room with a confident posture, but his gaze was often lost in thought, and then it happened. Kate was on the other side of the room, chatting animatedly with a small group. Her smile was radiant, and she gestured as she narrated something that clearly entertained everyone. William stopped. It was not a simple movement, it was as if time slowed down. He barely heard Nathan continue talking beside him. His vision was fixed on her. That slightly wavy brown hair, the gestures he remembered so well, and the laugh that always echoed in his memories in the most unexpected moments. He froze for a moment, as his heart seemed to betray every facade of control he had cultivated. For years, Kate felt the weight of a look. Instinctively, he turned around, and his smile diminished when he met William's eyes. An intense heat rose to his face, and his breathing hitched for a second. He was there. Taller, more mature, but still. Him. That same boy who had left without looking back. The shock on both their faces did not go unnoticed by Nathan, who smiled like the master of a theatrical play that had just reached its climax. "Kate, I think you know our man of honor. William. Just got back from Europe," Nathan said with a mischievous expression, as if he were the only one in the world to notice the tension that hovered in the air. William took a tentative step toward her, trying to regain control of his expression. Kate smiled, but it was a nervous smile, full of conflicting emotions. "William. It's good to see you again," she said, forcing a calm that was collapsing internally. "Kate. How long?" he replied, his voice sounding hoarser than usual. They shook hands briefly, but the touch was electric, as if it carried years of unspoken feelings. They both maintained eye contact, as if trying to absorb everything that had changed and everything that remained exactly the same. Nathan, realizing the emotional charge, smiled satisfied and walked away, leaving the two alone. The initial silence was almost deafening, but it soon gave way to a hesitant flow of questions and answers. "How are you? What have you been doing? How much has the city changed?" Each sentence felt like a careful step, an attempt to gauge the depth of the water before diving in. Kate watched him carefully, noticing the more mature features on his face, and the look that seemed to carry the weight of something he wasn't saying. William, on the other hand, could barely take his eyes off her. She looked even more beautiful than in his memories, with a presence that was both familiar and intoxicating. As the hours passed, the tension gave way to a slight nostalgia. They laughed at old stories, like the day Kate fell off her roller skates and William carried her to the school infirmary. Or the summer they spent entire afternoons reading books in a park, sharing a single bottle of lemonade. However, behind the laughter, there was a layer of melancholy that they both recognized but didn't have the courage to verbalize. Why had they moved away? Why had they never said what they really felt? As the night came to an end, William offered a ride, but Kate declined, saying she would rather walk home. He didn't insist, but he felt a pang of disappointment when he saw her walk away. Kate, in turn, walked through the silent streets, feeling both happy and restless. Something had changed. The reunion had brought up emotions she swore she had buried. William returned to his penthouse, where the city lights seemed colder than ever. He sat on the couch, reliving every moment of the conversation. A thought pounded in his mind. How had he allowed her to leave his life so easily? Kate, upon arriving home, left her shoes in the corner of the living room and sank onto the sofa, hugging a pillow to her chest. His heart was still beating fast. She knew that night was just the beginning of something much bigger, but she didn't know if she was ready to face everything that reunion meant. William woke up early that morning, but not because of a meeting or an urgent appointment. In fact, he had been sleepless since the sun began to rise over the Chicago skyline. His mind endlessly replayed the reunion with Kate. He remembered the details, the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed, as if time and distance hadn't extinguished that spark that had always attracted him. He shook his head, trying to focus on something else, but the restlessness persisted. In the company's meeting room, he viewed a presentation on market expansion as if it were a foreign language. The graphs and numbers seemed insignificant compared to the question that tormented him: should he or should he not try to get closer to her? He knew that life had taken them down very different paths. He, now CEO, had overwhelming responsibilities and an image to maintain. She, a successful dentist, seemed so confident and accomplished. Was there still room for him in her life? Or was it too late? Meanwhile, Kate couldn't concentrate either. In the office, while polishing the work instruments, she felt her hands hesitate. His thoughts wandered to William. It was ridiculous, she told herself, to feel so shaken. They had talked, laughed, and said goodbye like two old friends. And that's what he was supposed to be, just a friend from the past. But why, then, did the sound of his voice still echo in her mind? Why, when she closed her eyes, could she still see his smile, full of nostalgia and something else that she couldn't identify? Kate sighed and forced herself to focus on the next patient. She knew she shouldn't let the past interfere with her life now. There was no point in reopening old wounds or reliving feelings that perhaps only existed in your imagination. But there was an uncomfortable emptiness that she couldn't ignore, as if something essential was missing. The following days brought little signs that seemed to conspire to put them in touch again. A casual message from Nathan, mentioning how much he thought they had both changed, made William feel an almost uncontrollable urge to ask about Kate. He held back, uncomfortable with the idea of appearing anxious or, worse, weak. Kate, on the other hand, avoided any conversation about the party at all costs. When her friend Sophie casually asked what it was like to see William again, Kate smiled and said he seemed fine, quickly changing the subject to something trivial. But Sophie, perceptive as ever, noticed the slight blush on her face and the way she was fiddling with her hair, a classic gesture of nervousness. It was only a matter of time before fate, or perhaps Nathan's insistence, placed them in the same space again. Kate was in a cafe, absently leafing through a book, when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "It seems like you still prefer quiet corners, huh?" She turned around, and there he was. William held a coffee in one hand and had a hesitant smile on his face, as if he didn't know if she would welcome him. Kate blinked a few times in surprise before regaining her composure. "And it seems like you still prefer to surprise people." He gave a low laugh, and for a moment, it was as if they were back in a time when everything seemed simple. But the simplicity lasted only a few seconds before the tension returned between them and William sat down, politely asking if he could keep her company. Kate, although reluctant, nodded. The conversation that followed was marked by an odd balance between nostalgia and discomfort. They talked about the coffee, how different the city looked, and, inevitably, the party. "It was good to see you that night, Kate," he said suddenly, looking directly at her. His voice was low, almost vulnerable. It brought back a lot of good memories. Kate felt her heart racing, but kept her expression neutral. "Yes, it was good. Strange, but good is strange?" He raised an eyebrow. "Well, it's been so long. Sometimes it feels like we were two completely different people." He was silent for a moment, as if processing those words. "Maybe we are. But some things don't change." Kate looked away, trying to hide the storm of emotions those words had unleashed. She knew she was being cold, but it was a way to protect herself. Getting closer to William meant opening doors to feelings she had locked away for years, and that was too scary. When they said goodbye, William stared at her as she walked away. He felt the weight of her resistance and wondered if it was a sign to give up. But a part of him, the part that had never been able to forget her, said that there was still something there, something worth fighting to rediscover. Kate, on the other hand, walked quickly through the streets, trying to process everything. Why did he have to be so? William? Why did he make everything she believed to be true about her life seem insufficient? They both went back to their routines, but they knew something had changed. A seed had been planted, even though they both resisted recognizing it. The morning after meeting at the cafe, William felt an inexplicable need to change his routine. He parked his car a few blocks before the corporate building and decided to walk. Chicago was awake, with its distinctive sounds of car horns, sidewalk conversations, and the inviting aroma of cafes that graced the street corners. As he walked, he found himself thinking about Kate once again. It wasn't just nostalgia, there was something in her gaze, in her restrained smile, that disarmed him. On the other hand, Kate continued her routine at the office, but with a growing sense of restlessness. Something about reuniting with William seemed to have reopened doors she believed had been sealed forever. During a break, while organizing patient charts, she glanced at the clock. The next patient would be Nathan, who had insisted on having her teeth cleaned even when his schedule was tight. Nathan arrived with his usual charisma, bringing with him a light energy that lit up any room. He lay down on the chair and, with the apron already tied around his neck, began to talk. "So, what was it like seeing William?" he asked bluntly, a mischievous smile playing on his lips. Kate almost dropped her instruments, surprised by the question. It was good. He looks fine." Nathan laughed, noticing the hesitation in her voice. "Just that? Kate, I know you. Both. You always had something special, even if you never admitted it." "Nathan, that was a long time ago. We are in different places now." "Maybe, but who said you can't find a new path together?" He raised his eyebrows, as if planting the idea. "On purpose?" Kate sighed, trying to maintain her composure. But his words echoed in your mind even after he left. That same week, chance, or perhaps Nathan, again manipulating events, caused William and Kate to cross paths again. Kate was at a local market, choosing flowers for her office, when she heard a familiar voice. "You always preferred daisies." She quickly turned around and saw William standing there, with his hands in his pockets and a smirk that made her heart skip a beat. "I didn't know. You were a flower expert now." She tried to sound relaxed, but his presence affected her in a way she couldn't disguise. "I'm not, but I remember you saying that daisies were the happiest flowers. I thought maybe you still thought that way." She smiled, surprised by his memory. And for a moment, the world around him seemed to disappear. From that chance meeting, the two began to cross paths more frequently. There was no plan, at least not officially, but it seemed inevitable that their paths would intertwine. One afternoon, William unexpectedly showed up at Kate's office. He had a somewhat guilty expression, as if he knew he was imposing, but there Was something genuine about his presence. I was nearby and, well, I thought maybe I could invite you for coffee. Kate was surprised but couldn't refuse. The sunny afternoon took them to a small cafe on the corner. The conversation flowed, lighter and more relaxed than in previous meetings. They laughed at old memories, like the times they challenged each other to climb trees in the local park. Or the afternoons Kate tried to teach William how to bake cookies and he always burned the dough. "Are you still terrible at cooking?" she asked, teasing him. William laughed, shaking his head. "Let's just say that, if it were up to me, the family's cooking is in serious trouble." Their laughter filled the space between the cafe tables. But beneath the lightness, there was a palpable tension, as if they were both approaching something greater but were hesitant to cross the line. Over the next few weeks, casual encounters became almost natural. William began looking for excuses to be around a quick lunch or a stroll through the bookstore Kate frequented. Kate, in turn, began to look forward to these moments, even if she didn't admit it to herself. On one of these occasions, they were in a bookstore when William picked up a book of poetry and began absently leafing through it. He read aloud an excerpt about lost love and time. The words seemed to resonate in the air between them. Kate, who was next to her, felt a lump in her throat. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said, trying to ignore the way William's gaze seemed to pierce her soul. "Yeah." He closed the book, but kept his eyes fixed on her. "I think time is sometimes crueler than we imagine." Kate didn't know what to say. There was something in his voice, a weight, a sincerity that made her want to run away and stay at the same time. That night, they both returned home with conflicting thoughts. William knew he was falling in love with her again if he had ever stopped loving her. But he also knew that life was no longer as simple as it once was. He had responsibilities, an image to maintain. And she seemed so independent, so determined to pursue her life without strings attached. Kate, on the other hand, felt like she was losing control. William stirred something inside her that she preferred to keep buried. She knew he was no longer the boy she knew. He was a man now, with a life that seemed so far removed from hers. But even so, she couldn't help but feel that, perhaps, it was still the place where she felt most at home. The clock was almost midnight, and William was still in the company office, surrounded by stacks of documents and graphs that required important decisions. He had spent the day in endless meetings, listening to advisors and board members talk about expansion, new markets, and ambitious goals. His shoulders were tense, and the pressure felt overwhelming. He knew that as CEO, every decision he made was analyzed and judged, not only by investors, but also by his own family, especially his father. "William, we need to be aggressive. This is your chance to show that you are the leader this company needs." The phrase said by his father during a meeting that same day echoed in his mind. His father had always been direct and demanding, and William felt the weight of being the expected heir. He knew he couldn't fail, but lately, motivation seemed distant. He looked at his cell phone on the table and, without realizing it, opened the last message he had received from Kate, sent a few days earlier. It was a photo of a cafe they had visited together, accompanied by a casual comment, but just seeing her name on the screen made his chest tighten. He knew something was growing between them. It wasn't just nostalgia or the comfort of an old friendship. It was something deeper, something he couldn't deny. But at the same time, he wondered, was there room in his life for this? With so many eyes on him and the need to prove that he was worthy of the position he held, he feared that taking a step towards Kate would mean losing control of everything he had been building. Meanwhile, Kate faced a dilemma of her own. At the office, after the last patient of the day, she sat down at her computer and opened the email she had received from a large dental clinic in San Francisco. The proposal was tempting: open your own unit in partnership with a renowned chain, with the freedom to assemble a team and work with complete autonomy. It was an opportunity that many people would spend years waiting for. She read the message once more, but instead of excitement, she felt an uncomfortable confusion. What was really stopping her from accepting? The city was incredible, the offer was generous, and she had always told herself that she was willing to follow her career wherever it took her. But now, with William back in her life, a new layer of uncertainty had settled in her mind. Kate left the office and walked to the nearby park, where she often went to think. He sat on a bench in the yellow streetlight and let the cool Chicago wind hit his face. In moments like this, she used to find clarity, but that night, everything felt like a whirlwind. She knew the proposal required a quick response, but the idea of leaving the city now seemed more difficult than ever. William and Kate met again by chance a few days later, this time at a charity event that William's family company sponsored. Kate had been invited by Nathan, who seemed determined to keep them in the same space whenever possible. The hall was decorated with sophistication, filled with businessmen, philanthropists, and important personalities. William was impeccable in his suit, but his expression carried the tiredness of the difficult days he had been facing. He spotted Kate across the room, wearing an elegant dress that highlighted her natural simplicity. For a moment, he forgot about the crowd around him. When she finally saw him, she gave him a shy smile. He crossed the room to meet her, and for a few moments, the noise of conversations and laughter in the background seemed to disappear. "You look beautiful, Kate," he said, unable to hide the sincerity in his voice. She blushed slightly, but responded with a gentle teasing. "And you look tired. You should take a break from this corporate world every now and then." They laughed, but the conversation soon became more serious. They sat at a small table in the corner, away from the main activity. Kate told her about the proposal she had received, trying to sound casual, but she couldn't keep the uncertain tone from her voice. "Sounds like an incredible opportunity," William said, but there was something in his gaze that suggested he was choosing his words carefully. "Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe it's not the right time." His shoulders were tense, and the pressure felt overwhelming. He knew that as CEO, every decision he made was analyzed and judged, not only by investors, but also by his own family, especially his father. "William, we need to be aggressive. This is your chance to show that you are the leader this company needs." The phrase said by his father during a meeting that same day echoed in his mind. His father had always been direct and demanding, and William felt the weight of being the expected heir. He knew he couldn't fail, but lately, motivation seemed distant. He looked at his cell phone on the table and, without realizing it, opened the last message he had received from Kate, sent a few days earlier. It was a photo of a cafe they had visited together, accompanied by a casual comment, but just seeing her name on the screen made his chest tighten. He knew something was growing between them. It wasn't just nostalgia or the comfort of an old friendship. It was something deeper, something he couldn't deny. But at the same time, he wondered, was there room in his life for this? With so many eyes on him and the need to prove that he was worthy of the position he held, he feared that taking a step towards Kate would mean losing control of everything he had been building. Meanwhile, Kate faced a dilemma of her own. At the office, after the last patient of the day, she sat down at her computer and opened the email she had received from a large dental clinic in San Francisco. The proposal was tempting: open your own unit in partnership with a renowned chain, with the freedom to assemble a team and work with complete autonomy. It was an opportunity that many people would spend years waiting for. She read the message once more, but instead of excitement, she felt an uncomfortable confusion. What was really stopping her from accepting? The city was incredible, the offer was generous, and she had always told herself that she was willing to follow her career wherever it took her. But now, with William back in her life, a new layer of uncertainty had settled in her mind. Kate left the office and walked to the nearby park, where she often went to think. He sat on a bench in the yellow streetlight and let the cool Chicago wind hit his face. In moments like this, she used to find clarity, but that night, everything felt like a whirlwind. She knew the proposal required a quick response, but the idea of leaving the city now seemed more difficult than ever. William and Kate met again by chance a few days later, this time at a charity event that William's family company sponsored. Kate had been invited by Nathan, who seemed determined to keep them in the same space whenever possible. The hall was decorated with sophistication, filled with businessmen, philanthropists, and important personalities. William was impeccable in his suit, but his expression carried the tiredness of the difficult days he had been facing. He spotted Kate across the room, wearing an elegant dress that highlighted her natural simplicity. For a moment, he forgot about the crowd around him. When she finally saw him, she gave him a shy smile. He crossed the room to meet her, and for a few moments, the noise of conversations and laughter in the background seemed to disappear. "You look beautiful, Kate," he said, unable to hide the sincerity in his voice. She blushed slightly, but responded with a gentle teasing. "And you look tired. You should take a break from this corporate world every now and then." They laughed, but the conversation soon became more serious. They sat at a small table in the corner, away from the main activity. Kate told her about the proposal she had received, trying to sound casual, but she couldn't keep the uncertain tone from her voice. "Sounds like an incredible opportunity," William said, but there was something in his gaze that suggested he was choosing his words carefully. "Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe it's not the right time." He turned to face her, and there was something in his eyes that made her catch her breath. "And who said I have a choice?" Kate wanted to tell him that he could find a balance, but she knew it wasn't that simple. William carried the weight of expectations from his family, his company, and everyone around him. "And you?" he asked, changing focus suddenly. "Have you made a decision about San Francisco yet?" Kate was surprised by the direct question. She looked at the floor, fidgeting absently with the strap of her bag. "I'm still thinking. Sounds like a great opportunity. It seems." She paused, before adding, "but some things are making me hesitate." William wanted to ask more, wanted to know if he was one of those reasons. But he didn't have the courage to put it into words. "Kate, He began, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. She looked up at him, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. There was something so intense in his gaze, as if he was about to say something that would change everything. Kate felt her heart race, and she knew that if he said what she thought he would say, there would be no going back. But before he could continue, the balcony door opened, and Nathan emerged, smiling carefree. "Ah, you two are hiding here. I was looking for you. Come, let's make a toast." The moment was broken. William looked away, taking a step back as if he needed to compose himself. Kate, in turn, felt the impact of what could have been, but wasn't. "We're on our way," she replied, forcing a smile for Nathan. William nodded but remained silent as the three returned to the hall. He knew he had missed an opportunity, but he also wasn't sure if it was the right time. Later, as Kate was leaving, William walked her to the entrance. The cold night wind seemed more intense, but neither commented. "Thanks for coming tonight, Kate," William finally said, looking at her with an expression that seemed to carry 1,000 words not said. "It was a good night," she answered, but her voice was soft, almost melancholy. They stayed there for a moment that seemed to extend in time. None of them wanted to be the first to say goodbye, but they knew they needed. "Good night, William." "Good night, Kate." As she walked away, William stalked, watching until she disappeared into the darkness. He felt a void grow inside him, a feeling that something essential was escaping. Kate, on the other hand, walked through the silent streets feeling the same. She knew that this moment between them, that almost unbearable proximity, was a sign that something needed to change. But still, she didn't know how to take the next step. William's phone was resting on the dark wooden table in his room, insistently vibrating with messages and calls. He ignored them all. As much as his position required constant attention, at that moment he was completely oblivious to the corporate world. He was thinking of Kate. Since the fraternization, his mind had not stopped revolving around her. The way the wind played with the loose strands of her hair, the expression in her eyes when she hesitated to talk about San Francisco. Everything in it held him, disarmed him, made him want more. He knew he was at a break. It was not just a matter of will, but of necessity. He could no longer ignore what he felt for her. That persistent feeling that she was the missing piece in her life, even in the chaos of her career, became clearer every day. But the doubt eroded him. What if he was wrong? What if she didn't feel the same? He shook his head, frustrated with himself. The answer was clear. He needed to know, needed to say what was stuck inside him so long ago. He took the phone and, before he could hesitate, sent a message to Kate. "Are you busy tonight? We need to talk." Kate received the message while she was at home, sitting on the couch, looking at the clinic's email in San Francisco for the 100th time. She couldn't decide. Her heart seemed divided between the future she had planned and something she didn't dare to name, but kept her stuck to the present. When he saw William's message, he felt a mixture of expectation and anxiety. "I'm at home." "How are you coming here?" William answered immediately. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. The minutes that followed were an eternity for Kate. She arranged the room, checked her appearance in the mirror and tried to calm the accelerated pulse. When the intercom touched, she felt a wave of nervousness to go through her body. William entered the apartment with an expression that she could not decipher completely. He seemed determined, but also vulnerable, as if carrying something heavy. He greeted her with a soft smile, but there was no usual joke in her voice. "Thanks for receiving me, Kate." "Of course. Everything is fine?" "You looked serious in the message." "Yes." "No." He laughed nervously. I needed to see you." She watched him as he walked to the window, looking at the city's view. He took a deep breath before turning to her. "Kate, I've been thinking a lot about us." "About everything." She felt her heart shoot, but remained silent, letting him continue. "When I came back to Chicago, I thought my focus would be exclusively the company, the family, all the responsibilities that come with it. But since I met you again," he stopped, carefully choosing the words. "Since I met you again, I realized that something was missing in my life, something I didn't even know I needed to see you again." Kate felt her hands start shaking but kept her arms crossed. To disguise. He was saying exactly what she feared hearing and at the same time exactly what she longed for. "William." She started, but he raised a hand, asking her to let him finish. "I know may seem too late, and I know our lives are not as simple as they were before. But I can no longer ignore what I feel for you. I tried. Believe me, I tried. But I can't imagine my life without you." His words hovered in the air, loaded with emotion and something that seemed unshakable. His eyes were fixed on hers, seeking some reaction, some sign. Kate opened her mouth to answer, but the voice didn't come out immediately. She was confused, divided between the joy of listening to what she always wanted and the fear of what it meant to William. She paused, looking for the words. "I feel the same. I always felt it." He stepped toward him, but she raised a hand, creating a short distance, but our lives are so different now. You have the company, your family, all this pressure on you. And I have this opportunity in San Francisco. I don't want to be an obstacle to you, and I don't want you to be for me, obstacle?" He looked incredulous. "Kate, you would never be an obstacle. You are the only thing that makes me feel that there is something beyond all this, but what if it doesn't work? What if we get hurt in the process?" He shook his head. "I prefer to risk it. I prefer to fight for it, for us, than to spend the rest of my life asking me what it would be like if I had tried." His words were like a straight blow to her heart. She wanted to believe him, wanted to put the fear aside and surrender to that feeling. But there were so many uncertainties. William took another step, getting a few centimeters from her. "Tell me you don't feel the same. Tell me it's not worth trying, and I'm leaving now." Kate looked at him, his teary eyes. She knew she couldn't say that, because it would be a lie. "I can't say that, William." He let out a relieved sigh, and before she could think, he gently held her face and kissed her. It was a kiss loaded with years of repressed emotions, words that were never said, promises that had not yet been made. When they broke up, her eyes were full of tears, but there was a small smile on her lips. "I'm still scared. Me too. But let's not let it stop." The sound of the rain beating gently against the windows filled Kate's apartment. She was sitting on the couch, a cup of tea between the trembling hands, while her thoughts revolved around everything that had happened the night before. The kiss. William's words, so loaded with emotion and vulnerability, still echoed in his mind. He not only declared his feelings, but had done it with an intensity she never waited. And more than that, he had taken the weight of his own heart as he heard her admitted that he felt the same. But now, in the light in the gray morning, the fears were around his mind again as persistent shadows. Kate wondered how something that seemed so right during the moment could be so frightening when she thought about the implications. Your phone vibrated on the table. It was a message from William. "Can I see you today? I think we still have a lot to talk about." Kate looked at the message for a moment before answering. "Of course. Come to my office after my last patient. I'll be there until 7. During the day, Kate was lost between appointments and procedures, but there was constant anxiety in her mind. She knew the conversation they would have that night was crucial. It was the chance of both deciding how they would deal with what they felt and the realities of their distinct lives. At the end of the day, it was over 7 when Kate heard a slight knock on the office door. She was finishing organizing patient chips and felt her heart trigger when she saw William enter. He seemed tired, as if he had spent all day debating with himself, but his eyes shone with something she could only interpret as a determination. "Sorry to appear so late," he started, closing the door behind him. "All good. I was waiting." She smiled softly, but there was a tension in the air that neither could ignore. William took a few steps until he stopped in front of her. He took a deep breath, as if he tried to organize his thoughts before speaking. "Kate, I know yesterday was intense. And perhaps it was too much at once. But I need you to know that I didn't say any of that lightly." She nodded, indicating that he could continue. "I know our lives are complicated. I know I'm immersed to my neck on this role of CEO, and I know you have this great opportunity in San Francisco. But honestly, I can't imagine letting you go without fighting for us." Kate felt a knot in her throat. The sincerity in his voice, the way he spoke so clearly, touched something deep inside her. "William, I want that too. I want both of us. But at the same time, I cannot ignore what we are facing. I don't want you to sacrifice your career for me. And I don't want you to feel that I'm sacrificing mine for you." He took a step closer, gently catching his hands on his. "So let's find out a way. We don't have to solve everything now, but we can't let the fear of trying to stop us. I wasted too much time to you, Kate. I don't want to lose another day." His words finally broke something inside her, like a dam that gives in after years of pressure. Tears began to run down her face, but she smiled, a true smile, full of relief and emotion. "I don't want to waste more time either." William, feeling the weight of the conversation giving way to something lighter, more promising, let out a sigh and leaned down to kiss her. This time, there was no hesitation. The kiss was in love, but also kind, as if both were trying to convey everything they felt without words. When they broke up, they both laughed gently, a nervous sound, but full of relief. "I think that seals the deal," he said, with a small smile on the corner of his lips. "I think so," she answered, feeling the warmth of his hands still holding his own. They spent the night talking about how they would balance their lives, without making impossible promises, but determined to prioritize what they felt. William suggested that he could delegate more responsibilities in the company, something he knew it was difficult but necessary. Kate, on the other hand, decided that she did not need to respond immediately to the offer of the clinic. Perhaps there was a way to negotiate and stay in Chicago, at least for now. When they finally left the office, the fresh air of the night wrapped them, but none of them felt cold. William held Kate's hand as they walked together to his car, and she realized how that simple gesture seemed so natural, as if time and distance had never existed. Inside the car, as he took her home, Kate looked at him and felt a mix of gratitude and hope. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the weight of being alone. And when they reached the door of her apartment, she turned to him and said, "William, I think for the first time in a long time, I feel that I am exactly where I should be." He smiled, lightly squeezing her hand before he said, "And I feel that finally, I'm exactly who I should be with." The smile they exchanged was loaded with silent promises. The future was still uncertain, but at that moment they knew they were ready to face him together. William entered his room on the top floor of the corporate building and closed the door behind him, allowing momentary silence to involve him. He knew that meeting with the board would be crucial. It was the day he would finally discuss his decision to delegate more responsibilities and restructure the lead so that he could better balance his life. The pressure has always been a constant in his position, but after weeks of reflection, he knew he could not continue at the current pace. Not if he wanted to keep Kate in his life. He walked to his table, where a picture of his family stared at him. His father's serious look at the image seemed to judge him, but William could no longer be intimidated. He took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair before preparing mentally. The meeting began with the counselors sitting in a semicircle around the table. William began to present his plan, explaining how the division of responsibilities would allow the company to maintain the same level of excellence as it focused on a more strategic role. In the beginning, there was resistance, especially from his father. "William, you have been in charge for a few months. Any sign that you are loosening the reins can be seen as weakness," said the patriarch, a firm voice. William kept calm. He knew that this would be the hardest argument to face. "Dad, this is not weakness. It is effective leadership. Delegating is part of my role as CEO. In addition, the team we build is exceptional. I am confident that this restructuring will not only maintain the company's performance, but will also bring new perspectives." The silence that followed was tense. But one by one, the counselors began to agree with him. Finally, to his father, though reluctant, he nodded slowly. "Very well, William. Just don't make me regret trusting you." William left the room feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion. He knew there would still be challenges, but for the first time in a long time he felt that he was taking control of his life more significantly. Meanwhile, Kate was in her office, finishing organizing the necessary roles to start the process of opening her own clinic. After much reflection, she had decided that Chicago was where her heart was, both for her career and William. That afternoon she walked the streets near the new place she had chosen for the clinic. It was a busy but welcoming neighborhood, and she could already imagine what it would be like to have a space that was completely yours, a place where she could practice dentistry in her own way. The idea filled her with enthusiasm, but also with anxiety. Back at Kate's apartment that night, William appeared with a bottle of wine and a smile that showed both tiredness and relief. She opened the door and received him with a hug, immediately realizing the change in his energy. "Looks like you had an important day," she said as they sat on the couch. William opened the wine and served 2 cups before responding. "Today was a watershed. I was able to implement the restructuring it was planning. It wasn't easy, but it worked out. I'm so proud of you, William." "In truth," he smiled, holding her hand firmly. "I wouldn't have done it without you. I didn't do anything." "Yes, it did. You showed me that there is more in life than just work and responsibilities. You reminded me that it is important to fight for the things that really matter." Kate felt a warm up her chest. His words had a weight she didn't know she needed to hear. "Well, I think we're learning to fight together," she answered with a smile before continuing. "I decided I'll open my clinic here in Chicago." William's eyes illuminated. "You are going?" "Yes. I realized that this is where I want to be. Where I feel that I belong." William leaned over and kissed her softly, as if her words were confirmation that they were on the right track. Later, while they shared stories of the day and made plans for the future, William realized that he had never felt so at peace. The constant weight he carried seemed lighter, as if he had it was enough to balance any difficulty. Kate, in turn, felt renewed, as if finally found the balance between her professional and personal ambitions. Having William as a partner, someone who understood his doubts and shared his hopes, was more than she ever imagined. That night marked a new beginning for both of them. Together they were learning to build a future where both could thrive, without giving up who they were and what they meant to each other. The Chicago sun rose shyly, illuminating the city with a golden light that warmed the facades of the buildings and the cobblestone wet by the rain of the night before. High in a historical building, a newly installed sign shone in the morning light: Kate Roberts Dental Clinic. Kate stopped on the sidewalk in front of the scene, holding a small box full of papers and personal tools. Her heart beat hard, not nervous, but excitement. She took a deep breath, absorbing that moment. It was real. She had made it happen. As he climbed the steps from the entrance, he heard footsteps behind him. She didn't have to turn around to know who she was. Family perfume and unmistakable energy of William reached her first. I thought of being the first patient, he joked, holding a cup of coffee in each hand. Or maybe just the most punctual coffee delivery you'll have, Kate laughed, taking one of the cups and giving a sip. Well, if the CEO of one of the largest companies in the city will volunteer as a delivery man, who am I to refuse? William smiled, but there was something in his gaze that went beyond the joke. It was proud. He saw in her the woman who always admired, someone who not only dreamed but made her dreams come true. You know, Kate, it's not anyone who can turn an empty space into something so full of purpose. You did it. She looked at him, the brightness in her eyes reflecting both the gratitude and the love she felt. I had the right support. That makes all the difference. Within the clinic, still without patients on that first day, they sat on the small reception sofa. William, for a moment, seemed lost in thoughts. Kate noticed and leaned lightly, touching her hand. What are you thinking about? He took a while to answer, but when he did it, his voice was soft and sincere. I'm wondering how it would be different if I had never returned to Chicago. How I would have continued to live without knowing that I was incomplete. Kate felt a tightness in her chest, but it was a good tightening, as if his words filled something inside her. I also wonder that sometimes, but I think we would have found each other somehow. Perhaps elsewhere, but I can't believe we were not intended for it. They were silent for a moment, just holding their hands on each other, while the smooth sound of the city in the background seemed to accompany them. Later that day, William returned to work, and Kate treated her first patients in the new clinic. Each was immersed in their routines, but there was a lightness in both new ones. The love they shared was a silent but constant force, guiding them in their respective ways. Months later, the city was decorated for the fall. The leaves fell into shades of red and gold, and a fresh wind roamed the streets. William and Kate strolled the Lincoln Park, holding hands, with laughs echoing around them, while children played and couples occupied the benches. You know what's funny? Kate said, turning to him with a smile on her face. What? I used to come here after work, sit on one of those banks and ask me what was missing in my life. William lightly squeezed her hand, as if she wanted to make sure she never felt like this. And now, Kate stopped, staring at him directly. Now, I feel I found everything I was looking for. He smiled, pulling her to a hug. So we are 2.at that moment, with the leaves falling around them and the distant sound of the city as a backdrop. William leaned and kissed her. It was a kiss full of promises from days that would still come, challenges they would face together, and a love that only seemed to grow over time. As they walked back home, Kate looked at the horizon, where the sky was shy with orange and gold. With the sunset. Life was not perfect, but at that moment it seemed to be. And maybe that was enough. Our story for today comes to an end, friends, but before we say goodbye, I need your help to keep this rhythm of stories alive. If this story moved, inspired, or simply entertained you, don't hesitate to give this video a like. It's as simple as a click, but it means the world to us. Do you want more stories like this one? Then subscribe to Happiness of Love and don't forget to activate the notification bell so you never miss any of our new adventures. Remember, we have a new video every 2 days. Share this video with your friends and family. Who knows? You might inspire someone to make a positive change in the world. Leave us a comment letting us know which part of the story touched your heart the most. We love reading your thoughts and connecting with you. And if you're watching this on your phone, don't forget to hit the hype button to show your enthusiasm and help us reach even more people with these inspiring stories. Thank you for being part of the Happiness of Love community. Your support is like the heartbeat of this channel, vital and full of life. Oh, and before you go, check out the video popping up on the screen right now. It's another amazing story you won't want to miss. See you in 2 days with another story that will take your breath away. Until then, keep the rhythm of love and inspiration alive, one beat at a time.